Have you ever sat by the window on a quiet morning, cup of tea in hand, and wondered why the world feels so fast now, so overwhelming? There's a certain ache that can come with aging, not just in the body, but in the soul. It's the ache of feeling left behind, or perhaps invisible. But what if there was a way to slow it all down? Not the clock, not the years, but the noise. What if peace wasn't something you had to chase, but something you could touch right here, right now? That's what mindfulness offers us. And no, it's not about emptying your mind or sitting cross-legged on the floor for hours. It's not about doing it right or being perfectly serene. It's about coming home to yourself with kindness. And especially for those of us in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, this might be one of the most powerful gifts we still have time to receive. Let's begin by exploring what mindfulness really is and why it might matter now more than ever. Mindfulness isn't about fixing you, it's about finding you. A lot of people think mindfulness means trying to silence the mind, but that's a misunderstanding. True mindfulness isn't about controlling your thoughts. It's about noticing them. It's about pausing long enough to become aware of what's happening inside you without judgment. You can think of it as a kind of gentle noticing, a soft return to the present moment where life is actually happening. For seniors, this practice can be life-changing. Why? Because so much of aging brings the uncertainty, health changes, loss, isolation. And in the face of all that, it's easy to feel anxious, disconnected, or even purposeless. Mindfulness gives us the chance to reconnect to our breath, our senses, our surroundings, and yes, even to joy. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and stay with me until the end. You might hear something that brings you peace, clarity, or even hope. Here's what mindfulness is not. Let's clear something up right away. Mindfulness is not the same as meditation. Meditation is a more formal practice, often done sitting in silence, following the breath, or repeating a mantra. Mindfulness, on the other hand, can be practiced anytime, anywhere. Washing dishes, walking down the street, listening to music, sitting in the garden. Mindfulness is simply choosing to be fully present with whatever you're doing, without rushing to the next thing or dwelling on the last. It's noticing the warm water on your hands, the breeze on your face, the sound of a bird outside your window. It's remembering, even if just for a moment, that this moment is enough. Many older adults think mindfulness is for younger folks, or people who already live calm, organized lives. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, seniors often make the most naturally mindful students because we've seen enough life to know how precious the little things truly are. Why mindfulness matters more now than ever. There's a unique kind of stress that comes with aging. Maybe it's the constant stream of medical appointments, or the loneliness that creeps in after friends or spouses pass away. Maybe it's the frustration of forgetting words, or the fear of becoming dependent. All of this creates a kind of inner static, an emotional noise that drains our energy. Mindfulness doesn't erase these realities, but it changes how we hold them. Instead of bracing against every change, we begin to soften toward them. We meet our own experience with tenderness. We learn to say, "This is what I feel, and that's okay." We begin to realize that peace isn't about having a perfect life. It's about showing up fully for the life we have. The next point is something most people never hear about, but it could completely change how you feel. You don't have to be calm to begin. This might be the most important truth of all. You don't have to be calm, spiritual, or even optimistic to start practicing mindfulness. You can begin exactly where you are, worried, restless, skeptical. All you need is a willingness to pay attention, kindly. That's it. Even one mindful breath, just one, can shift something inside you. And over time, those small shifts build resilience. They help us meet pain with grace. They create space between us and our worry. They remind us that while we can't control everything around us, we can choose how we show up for it. You don't need a fancy cushion or incense or hours of free time. You don't need to get it right. You just need the courage to be here, now, with your breath, your body, and your beautiful, ever-changing heart. Let's talk about what we still have. Aging often puts the spotlight on what we've lost: youth, speed, flexibility. But mindfulness invites us to turn our attention toward what remains. The smell of coffee, the feel of sunlight, the sound of laughter. These are the things that fill a day with meaning. These are the gifts that aging cannot take away. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to see with new eyes. We notice how the garden changes with each season. We recognize how a moment of stillness can feel like a gift. We become more attuned to beauty, even in the ordinary. And perhaps most importantly, we learn how to sit with ourselves and not feel alone. What comes next might be the most healing truth of all. As we move forward, we'll explore simple practices you can begin today, practices that meet you exactly where you are, in whatever body or mood you're in. No pressure, no rules, no perfections, just presence. And in that presence, you might find what you've been searching for: peace, purpose, and a quiet kind of joy that's been with you all along. So take a deep breath, and when you're ready, let's keep going. What comes next might surprise you. There's a quiet kind of bravery that comes with growing older. It's not the kind we're used to seeing in movies. It's not loud or flashy. It's the kind of courage that shows up when you decide, even after everything life has thrown at you, to try again, to try something new, to soften, to heal, to be present. And that's what this part of our journey is about. Not forcing change, but preparing gently for it. Because the truth is, mindfulness isn't something you master overnight. It's something you allow. And before we talk about how to practice it, we need to talk about something deeper: how to make room inside ourselves to receive it. Let's look at what it really means to get ready, not perfectly, but honestly. Why is it so hard to just be present? That's a question many seniors ask, especially when first hearing about mindfulness. And it's a valid one. Why is it so hard to just sit and breathe? Why does the mind wander to aches and appointments, regrets, and what-ifs? Because we've lived. And with life comes noise, memories, responsibilities, fears we've carried for decades. When you close your eyes, it's not just today that greets you. It's the whole of your story. The people you've lost, the roles you've played, the habits you've developed to survive. So if being present feels difficult, that's not failure. That's experience. That's your beautifully complex, deeply lived life. And mindfulness doesn't ask you to erase any of it. It simply invites you to sit beside it, without flinching, without judging, just noticing. Most people never hear this part, but it could change how you move forward forever. You don't need to clear your mind. You need to meet it. One of the most common misconceptions about mindfulness is that it's about having a blank mind, but that's not the goal. In fact, your mind can be busy, noisy, even anxious, and you can still be mindful. Because mindfulness isn't about changing the mind. It's about changing your relationship to the mind. Imagine sitting on a bench by a river. Your thoughts are like leaves floating by. Some are lovely, some are painful, some you've seen before, over and over. The practice of mindfulness is simply this. You sit on the bench and you watch. You don't chase the leaves. You don't dive in after them. You just watch. And over time, something beautiful happens. You realize you're not the leaves. You're not even the river. You're the one sitting quietly, bearing witness. That's your true self. Still, whole, unbroken. Begin with the body. It's wiser than you think. For many seniors, the body becomes a source of frustration. It forgets things. It hurts. It slows down. But here's a gentle reframe. What if your body isn't failing you? It's simply inviting you to listen more closely. Mindfulness begins not in the mind, but in the body. That might sound surprising, but it's true. Because the body lives in the present. It doesn't worry about next week or dwell on last year. It breathes. It beats. It aches. It softens. When we bring our awareness to it, we return home. Try this. Place your hand on your heart. Feel the rise and fall of your breath. That's mindfulness. That's the beginning. No performance, no perfection, just presence. Even if you're living with chronic pain, limited mobility, or fatigue, mindfulness can still be yours. In fact, it may be even more powerful in those moments because you're meeting your body with kindness instead of frustration. You don't need a quiet room. You just need a quiet moment. Many people think mindfulness requires the perfect setting: silence, nature, soft music. And while those things can help, they're not necessary. Mindfulness is available even in the chaos, even in the noise, even in a waiting room, or a supermarket line, or the middle of the night when sleep won't come. It begins when you notice. When you say to yourself, "I'm here, I'm breathing, that's enough." One of the most sacred places to practice is right where stress happens, during a tough phone call, while waiting on test results, in the stillness after hearing bad news. You don't have to escape your life to live more mindfully. You just have to be willing to meet it with awareness. Let's talk about what holds us back. Sometimes, what keeps us from practicing isn't the noise. It's the story we tell ourselves about who we are. I'm too old to learn new things. My brain doesn't work like it used to. This stuff isn't for people like me. But here's the thing. Mindfulness doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't ask for your resume. It doesn't need you to be spiritual, flexible, or even optimistic. It just needs you to show up, real, raw, honest. If anything, seniors have an advantage. You know what matters. You know the value of time. You know the cost of stress. You've lived long enough to understand that peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. So if you've ever felt like mindfulness is too late for you, please hear this. It's not. In fact, it might be just in time. Now let's prepare ourselves with softness, not striving. Don't try to force anything. Just begin by noticing your breath once a day, or pausing before your morning coffee, or feeling the warmth of the water as you wash your hands. These are not small things. These are the doorway. Because mindfulness isn't something we do. It's something we return to again and again. And each time we return, it gets a little easier, a little quieter, a little more like home. So if all you do today is pause, take one mindful breath and say to yourself, "I'm here," that is enough. Let's keep going. What comes next might surprise you. There comes a moment in every journey when understanding turns into action. It's one thing to learn about peace. It's another to begin living it. That moment, when something shifts from being a nice idea to a lived experience, that's where transformation truly begins. In this part of our journey, we move gently into practice. but not the kind that requires effort, achievement, or performance. This is about engaging with life from the heart, with presence, with honesty, and with a willingness to show up just as you are. This is not about doing more, it's about doing differently. Here's where things become real, because this is what it looks like to live the change, not just think about it. Let's begin with the breath. It's always been with you. You've breathed every day of your life. And yet, how often have you actually noticed it? One of the simplest ways to begin a mindfulness practice is to return to your breath. Not to fix it, not to control it, just to notice. Feel the air as it enters your nose, fills your lungs, and leaves your body. You don't need to count or measure. Just allow yourself to be present with the rhythm, like waves on a shore, like a lullaby the body sings to itself. This act, this tiny, invisible act, can anchor you. It can calm a racing heart, quiet a spiraling thought, soften a moment of grief. It's not a trick, it's a truth. Your breath is always here. It's always now. Now, bring your senses with you. They are your doorway. One of the most powerful mindfulness practices is something called a sensory check-in. At any time, you can pause and ask yourself, what do I vision? What do I hear? What do I feel against my skin? What do I smell or taste? You don't have to answer out loud, just notice. When you do this, you pull yourself out of the fog of worry or the memory and back into the vivid texture of the present moment. It's a simple act, but it opens up something profound. You may notice the sound of birds outside your window, the warmth of the mug in your hand, the soft texture of your sweater. These aren't just background details. They are invitations to come alive. Even the ordinary can become sacred when seen with presence. This is where mindfulness stops being a practice and starts becoming a way of life. When you fold the laundry, can you feel the fabric with appreciation? When you water the plants, can you notice the sparkle of sunlight on the leaves? When you sit at the kitchen table, can you truly taste your tea? It doesn't matter what you're doing. It matters how you're doing it. So much of aging is filled with things we have to do. Take medications, go to appointments, manage routines. But when you bring mindfulness into these moments, they begin to feel less like obligations and more like rituals of care, moments of reclaiming your life. Let me tell you about June. June is 76. She lives alone now since her husband passed a few years ago. For a while, her days blurred together. Wake up, coffee, news, silence, sleep, repeat. Then she found a 5-minute mindfulness video on her TV one morning by accident. Something about it stuck with her. She started sitting in her chair just for a few minutes a day, placing her hand over her heart and breathing. At first, she thought it was silly, but she kept coming back. Not because she had to, but because it gave her something she didn't realize she needed. Now, when she gets anxious about her health, she breathes. When she feels lonely, she listens to the birds and names them. When she eats, she pauses to feel gratitude. She says it doesn't fix everything, but it makes everything feel more real, more manageable, more hers. And what happened next? Well, that's the part no one warned her about, but it changed everything. She started feeling joy again. Not the big, loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that arrives when you feel the warmth of the sun through the window. The kind that fills your chest when you laugh at your own forgetfulness. The kind that visits when a memory returns, not as a source of pain, but as a reminder of love. Mindfulness didn't erase June's grief. It didn't make her 20 years younger, but it gave her access to her life again. Not the life she used to have, but the one she's living now. And that, she says, has made all the difference. So how can you begin living this way right now? You don't need to change your whole day. Just choose one moment, any moment, to be fully present. When you brush your hair, when you look out the window, when you touch your face, choose that moment and be there for it. Breathe into it. Let it be enough. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming you again, beneath the roles, the routines, the distractions. It's about returning to your essence, the you that still laughs, the you that still hopes, the you that still notices the way sunlight dances on the floor. Mindfulness is not a task. It's a return, not to youth, not to productivity, but to presence, to this, to now. And maybe that's the most radical act of all, choosing to engage with life, even now. Especially now, because you are still here, and your presence, your true, mindful, embodied presence, is a gift to yourself, to others, to this world. So take a breath, feel your feet on the ground, look around, and let your senses guide you. You don't need a plan. You just need this moment. Let's keep going. What comes next might be the beginning of something even deeper. There's a question many of us begin to ask as we grow older, not always out loud, but in the quiet spaces between thoughts. Was it all worth it? It's not a question of regret necessarily. It's more like an invitation to make sense of the years behind us, the joys, the losses, the ordinary days that felt small but somehow shaped everything. And more than that, it's a longing to find meaning in what's left. Mindfulness doesn't just help us live in the present, it helps us look back with gentleness and forward with intention. It teaches us that our journey is not just a series of events, but a sacred unfolding, a story still being written. And now, at this stage of life, you have something rare: perspective. Now we're not just moving, we're transforming the way we see ourselves in this season of life. Aging isn't the closing of a story, it's the deepening of it. So often, society paints aging as decline, as if growing older means becoming less vibrant, less valuable, less alive. But that's a story someone else wrote, and you don't have to accept it. In truth, aging is one of the most profound spiritual invitations we ever receive. It strips away what doesn't matter. It brings what's essential into focus. And if we're lucky, it gives us the courage to live more honestly than ever before. Mindfulness helps us see this, not as a theory, but as a lived truth. When we practice presence, we begin to notice the richness of our own being, the wisdom in our wrinkles, the beauty in our limitations, the depth in our stillness. We stop measuring life by how much we can do and start honoring it for how deeply we can feel. Let's talk about grief, not as a wound, but as a teacher. Every older adult carries grief. It may be fresh or quiet, loud or invisible. It may come in waves or sit silently in the background. We grieve people. We grieve places. We grieve versions of ourselves that no longer exist. But mindfulness offers a gentle way to sit with grief without being consumed by it. It doesn't ask us to move on. It asks us to move with, to breathe with, to soften around the sharp edges of pain and let them reshape us into something more tender, not more broken. You are not weak because you grieve. You are not behind because you feel lost sometimes. These feelings are proof that you have loved, lived, and cared. And in the practice of presence, we create space for those feelings to simply be. You've come this far, but what's just ahead might stir something even more powerful. Memory becomes medicine when we meet it with mindfulness. Many seniors worry about forgetting things, names, dates, appointments. And while that's part of the journey for some, there's another side to memory that often gets overlooked, the kind of remembering that heals. When we sit quietly and allow a memory to come, without judgment or distraction, it can become a kind of inner pilgrimage, a return not to escape, but to honor. You may recall the sound of your mother's voice, the smell of a kitchen from long ago, the laughter of a child you once held. These aren't just memories. They are threads in the tapestry of who you are. Mindfulness doesn't demand that we relive the past. It invites us to relate to it differently, to welcome what arises, breathe into it, and gently let it move through us, not to get stuck, but to get free. The present moment is where meaning is made. It's tempting to think that the most meaningful parts of life are behind us. Big achievements, big love, big moments. But the truth is, meaning is not something we find in events. It's something we create in attention. When you look into someone's eyes and really listen, when you sit with your hands in your lap and feel the quiet, when you speak kindly to yourself after making a mistake, these are the moments that shape the soul. Not because they're grand, but because they're true. Your life still holds meaning, not in spite of your age, but because of it. You've earned the right to slow down and go deeper. You've earned the space to stop performing and start being. Purpose isn't always loud. It's often hidden in the small things. Many older adults wonder, what's my purpose now? Especially after retirement, after children are grown, after loved ones pass on. But purpose doesn't have to be a job or a role. It can be a way of showing up. Maybe your purpose is to bring calm to others simply by your presence. Maybe it's to tend to your plants or to send cards to old friends. Maybe it's to smile at strangers who look like they're having a hard day. These may seem like small things, but they are the things that hold the world together. Mindfulness teaches us that every moment can be meaningful if we meet it with care. And maybe that's the greatest purpose of all, to be a steady, loving witness to the world around us. To be someone who chooses presence in a world full of distraction. You are not just aging, you are awakening. In this season of life, you are not becoming less. You are becoming more true, more centered, more aware of what matters. You are not defined by what you've lost, but by what you've chosen to keep close. Kindness, clarity, courage. And those qualities are not fading, they're deepening. So let's keep walking gently and with intention. Let's continue to sit with what is and welcome it like an old friend. Let's live these years, not in fear of endings, but in reverence for what they reveal. Because the journey isn't over, it's just unfolding in a quieter, richer key. So here we are, at a threshold, not an ending. You've journeyed through the stillness, the reflection, the practice, and the quiet awakening that mindfulness brings. And maybe now, there's a part of you that feels lighter, or more grounded, or simply more you. If nothing else, I hope this conversation has reminded you of one powerful truth. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are still becoming. And your presence in this world matters deeply. In a time of life when so many things feel like they're slipping away, mindfulness gently places something back in your hands. Agency, dignity, the choice to be present. And that is no small gift. You still have access to wonder. That sparkle of light on the floor in the late afternoon. The way your hands feel when they hold something warm. The sound of a loved one's voice, even if it's just a memory. These are moments that are easy to miss when we're rushing, worrying, or lost in what-ifs. But when we pause, truly pause, they return to us, not as background noise, but as blessings. Mindfulness teaches us that we don't need to chase happiness. We simply need to notice joy wherever it's quietly waiting. And at this stage of life, we may just be better equipped than ever to do that, because we've lived through enough noise to know how precious the silence is. You're allowed to move more slowly now, on purpose. There's a kind of power in slowing down that no one talks about. When you walk more slowly, you notice the flowers. When you listen without rushing to respond, you truly hear. When you breathe without needing to fix, you begin to heal. You are allowed to rest, to savor, to be. Not because you've earned it through decades of work, but because your existence is reason enough. The world may keep spinning faster and faster, but you get to choose your own pace. Let others hurry. Let others strive. You have something richer now, presence. And that presence is a gift not only to yourself, but to everyone you encounter. You are worthy of peace, not as a reward, but as a birthright. So many of us were taught to put others first, to achieve, to produce, to serve. And while those things have their place, they sometimes left little room for simply being. But here, now, you are allowed to just be. And that being is enough. You don't need to meditate for an hour a day, or say the right things, or sit in stillness like a monk. Mindfulness can look like sipping tea in silence, like brushing your hair slowly, like putting your hand over your heart and whispering, "I'm still here." These moments of presence are not small. They are sacred, and the more you honor them, the more they'll multiply. Your life is still unfolding. Don't stop watching it bloom. There will still be hard days. That's the nature of life. But within those days, there will also be beauty, laughter, connection, peace. And the more you practice presence, the more visible those things become. You are not just aging. You are evolving. You are becoming someone more grounded, more aware, more attuned to the quiet brilliance of life. And this is your time, not to prove, not to achieve, but to receive. So let this be your invitation to keep showing up, to keep noticing, to keep returning to this moment and the next, because each one holds the possibility of something soft, true, and nourishing. You're not alone on this path. Some days it might feel that way, but look again. There are others, just like you, walking this same road, tired of the noise, hungry for peace, ready to reclaim a sense of purpose not through striving, but through presence. This community exists, and if you let yourself step into it, you might find something beautiful waiting: companionship, compassion, a reminder that you are part of something larger than your own story. So keep going, not because you have to, but because the journey is worth it. A final breath, a final blessing. As we close, I invite you, just for this moment, to breathe with me. Gently, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. Place your hand over your heart if that feels right, and repeat silently or out loud if you wish. I am here. I am enough. I am whole. Let that be your compass. Let that be your ground. And when the world feels too loud again, or the ache returns, or the doubts creep in, come back here. Come back to yourself. Whatever age you are, whatever road you've taken to get here, you are still becoming. And that, my friend, is the most beautiful part.